Welcome everyone to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community. Once during a summer month, my younger brother Kyle, who had been living in South America for the past 3 years and even managed to start his own small business there, wrote to me. Besides, he finally found a girlfriend with whom he decided to formalize the relationship. Before this, he always preferred being in casual relationships and never got too attached to anyone. And now he sent me a postcard saying he was planning to visit us and stay for about an hour or two if possible. Unlike Kyle, I had been married for a long time, and my wife Marie and I had 2 wonderful sons growing up. The elder Michael was already 15, and the younger Sammy was 12, but they had almost identical tastes and preferences and always managed to get along, although sometimes they teased each other like children. Marie was sometimes surprised because among her peers, families with boys often led to frequent fights or arguments. But it was a bit different for us. I always tried my best in raising them because both our parents had taught us, my brother and me, to live peacefully and avoid unnecessary conflicts. I informed the whole family about Kyle's visit during dinner, and everyone was genuinely happy that he would come to visit us. But the only inconvenience for my sons during this period was that they would have to share a room. The younger one took this rule less painfully, but Michael was a bit upset. I understood him since he was at an age where he wanted more personal space. However, after dinner, I talked to him, and as usual, my words had an effect, and he promised to endure until the guests left. The day Kyle's plane was supposed to land, I went to the airport to meet him. I got in there a little early, and while I waited, I was mostly looking at the people walking by. And for some reason, it seemed to me for a moment that something was wrong, as if the world around me had changed somehow. The waiting time passed quickly, and soon I could hear and see Kyle waving at me. I hurried over to him with a hug because I'd missed him so much in 3 years. And when I got to him, I noticed that he hadn't flown in alone. There was a young Latin American woman next to him, very beautiful. Kyle barely had time to greet me before he started introducing me to his companion. She was his wife, whom I had seen in photos he sent me before, but today I saw her for the first time in person. Earlier, somehow there was no time to fly to them or them to us, and even at their wedding I did not have a chance to visit, as they just quietly signed, marking the event only in a very small circle. But it didn't matter to me. I was just glad that my brother was happy and could finally come to visit us. We headed straight to my house where Marie had already set up a festive table and was getting ready to welcome the guests along with the children. Kyle didn't come empty-handed. First of all, he brought excellent alcohol to the table, made where he now lived. "Give it a try," he said. "You'll love it instantly, and you'll never want to drink anything else." "Oh, Sammy, how you've grown," he lifted the little one, but soon put him back down as the child weighed much more than when Kyle last saw him. He tousled Michael's hair and expressed how happy he was to see him. The brother and his wife also brought some gifts for the children, which they immediately started examining, and we decided not to force the kids to sit at the table with the adults. After sending the children to their room with new toys and dessert, we chatted for about 2 hours, sipping the alcohol my brother brought. I realized it was more of a homemade spirit, quite strong indeed. After a while, our conversation became very relaxed, and I'd even say we all got too comfortable with Kyle acting very uninhibitedly and not holding back and complimenting my wife. Yet Ruth, his wife, seemed oblivious to it all. Sometimes my brother's behavior bothered me, but I attributed it to the alcohol's effect and didn't reproach him in any way. Kyle and Ruth went out, while Marie headed to the kitchen. Meanwhile, I decided to browse the newsfeed on my phone and didn't notice when I blacked out. I didn't dream of anything specific, just some random thoughts that occasionally flickered, but it felt like they were all happening in reality. Then I opened my eyes. I saw the ceiling above me, and my temples throbbed with a pulsating ache. Recalling the earlier events, I realized that the alcohol was indeed stronger than I had assumed, and those last few drinks were probably unnecessary. Nonetheless, I decided to go to the bedroom and continue resting there, as the couch wasn't particularly comfortable. It was 2:30 according to the clock. I looked around and found no one. The light was dim, and the house was quiet. It seemed like everyone had dispersed to their rooms and fallen into a deep sleep. I reached the room quite swiftly, albeit occasionally stumbling over furniture in the darkness. Upon entering, I saw Marie already lying in bed, turned away from me, almost entirely covered by the blanket. I didn't want to wake her, so I quietly lay down beside her. Then I heard a faint moan from her, uttered in her sleep. Instinctively, I placed my hand on her waist and lightly ran it along her side to help her feel safe. I always did this when she had a bad dream, and these movements usually eased her sleep. But this time, I felt Marie beginning to wake up. "Sorry, dear. I didn't mean to wake you," I murmured to her. She, without rushing, turned to face me and said, "What?" It seemed to me that I heard a voice that wasn't my wife's, and again, I thought it might be due to the alcohol. Still, I wanted to be sure, so I turned my head toward her. By then, she had also started turning toward me, and when the blanket slipped from her head, I saw that the person in the bed next to me wasn't Marie at all. "Damn," I exclaimed, jumping off the bed. Then I felt for the switch on the nightstand and turned on the night lamp. "What are you doing here?" In my bed lay Ruth, wearing just a thin shirt, and she seemed rather comfortable. But upon seeing me, she didn't react in surprise like I did. Instead, she remained completely calm. "Brian, what's wrong?" she asked. "What's wrong? What are you doing here? Where's my wife? And why aren't you with my brother?" I looked around as if my brother and wife were supposed to be somewhere around here. What the hell is happening? "Oh, calm down. They're probably sleeping somewhere too. We all drank quite a bit. Just lie down and sleep. We'll figure it out in the morning." "What do you mean, figure it out in the morning?" I couldn't understand her logic and began getting ready to search for Marie. She must have been somewhere in the house for sure. I left the bedroom and started scanning the hallway walls. My thoughts were still a bit fuzzy, and I felt the heaviness of a hangover. But I couldn't just leave things as they were and proceeded, listening intently for any sound. Ruth called out to me again, asking me not to worry, but I ignored her and headed towards the room assigned to Kyle. Initially, I didn't immediately think my wife would be there. I just wanted my brother to take his wife with him. When I entered, I saw Marie lying on the bed. My brother was nowhere to be found. I hadn't even considered where he might be. "Marie, wake up." I approached her and gently shook her shoulder. She mumbled something in her sleep at first, then opened her eyes. But upon seeing me, she reacted with mild shock, as if she expected to see someone else entirely. "Brian," she asked in a drowsy voice, rubbing her eyes. "Marie, what are you doing here? What happened at all?" I woke up in the living room and in the house. "Oh, don't worry." She sat up and looked around. "We probably had too much to drink. Did you check on the kids? Are they asleep?" At that moment, I somehow wasn't up for it. I knew they were smart guys and wouldn't engage in any nonsense, but what bothered me more was the chaos that had occurred among the four of us and where Kyle had disappeared to. Marie got up from the bed and, glancing around, led me out of the room, suggesting we go to our bedroom. Ruth was still there, and Marie politely escorted her out. But I was still concerned about where Kyle was. Leaving my wife to get ready for bed, I wandered around the house to find him. On my way, I peeked into the boys' room. They were already fast asleep, so I continued. No matter how much I roamed the house, I couldn't find Kyle. I even bumped into Ruth again, who had gone to the kitchen for some water. When she mentioned he might have gone outside to smoke, I realized I could use some fresh air too and headed outside. The night was moonless, and the porch was only lit by a couple of streetlights hanging under the roof. I noticed my brother in the farthest corner. He leaned against the railings, deep in thought. It seemed he didn't even notice me approach until I called out to him. "Oh, you also decided to smoke?" he asked me, offering me a pack of his cigarettes. "No, just came out. Tell me, how did it happen that your wife ended up in my room? You two were together the whole time. Oh man, you really had a lot to drink last night. You don't remember anything." Ruth and I had a little argument, and she went to sleep. Must have mixed up the rooms. I stayed in the kitchen drinking and smoking. That's why I just came out. You seem a bit agitated. Yeah. How can I stay calm when there's something strange happening in the house? But I'm glad everything's cleared up. I sent Ruth to your room so you can go to her. Kyle offered me another drink, but I didn't feel like it anymore, so I went to my wife. By morning, I was feeling better, maybe because I slept in a comfortable bed or perhaps the hangover was wearing off. But my head no longer hurt, and that pleased me. I had a few days off ahead. I specifically took time off work to spend more time with my brother. However, Marie couldn't leave her project in someone else's hands. When I went down to the kitchen, my wife had already prepared breakfast for everyone and was about to leave. "Darling, maybe stay home today." I was a little worried about her condition, remembering how bad I felt last night. "No, I can't. Besides, the director scheduled a meeting for today. I got a message in the morning. A bit inconvenient timing. I'll have to stay a bit longer today. You'll manage without me, right?" Marie kissed me and headed towards the door. It seemed to me that she was even glad she had to stay at work longer. But why? What happened yesterday evening that affected her behavior like this? Kyle and Ruth hadn't left the room yet. It seemed they were still asleep. But I didn't need them. I went to Michael and decided to talk to him. I addressed him as an adult, hoping he could help me this time too. "Listen, son. I wanted to talk to you about last night. Is Sammy awake?" "Yes, he's in the bathroom." "So, what did you want to talk about?" "You understand that adults sometimes. In general. I wanted to ask, did you notice anything strange last night? For example, anything really. I get it. You blacked out and missed the interesting stuff? Okay, Dad. We actually stayed in the room as you asked. But only. What is it, Michael?" "Dad, forgive us. We just wanted to joke. It wasn't even my idea. My son told me that the night before, he and Sammy, upon seeing Ruth, decided to set up a nanny cam in their room, hidden in a teddy bear. They just wanted to play a childish prank and observe the woman who was a bit different from us. I even understood them. They were growing boys, and such curiosity is normal at Michael's age. But I also didn't quite like that they chose to act like that, especially in our house. And the camera was still there. On one hand, I should have scolded the kids for such an act, considering what my brother and his wife might have been doing in there. But now, I was curious myself since I found my wife there yesterday. I hoped the recording might clarify something, as Marie herself didn't want to talk about last night. Waiting until the relatives came out of the bedroom, I seized the moment and retrieved the bear from there. I couldn't immediately watch it as Kyle literally followed me everywhere. But later, I managed to find some privacy in the office and started watching. I didn't even imagine what to expect from that recording and thought I'd probably see my drunk wife collapsing into sleep. But what I saw there fundamentally changed my attitude toward both my wife and my brother. The first shots were of Kyle and Ruth. They were in bed for a while, and after a few minutes they were arguing. I don't even know what it's about. But then Ruth walked out, and soon my wife walked into the room. At first she and Kyle were just talking, but the topic of their conversation was unpleasant enough for me. I could make out them talking about something that had happened between them 3 years ago, before he left for another country. As I listened, I realized that my wife and brother had betrayed me years ago and had pretended to be loving and innocent all along. But that wasn't all. I continued to watch the tape and saw that these two had decided to resume their relationship again. They weren't even embarrassed that I was in the house and could wake up at any minute and find them. And where was Ruth at that moment? Or did that lady know all about it, and that's why she'd taken refuge in our room? I had a few answers at that point, but I had even more questions. Realizing how badly I had been deceived and taken advantage of, I felt a surge of anger and a desire for revenge. The freak was now walking around my house and staring shamelessly into my eyes, so I didn't wait a second longer and went to him. Overflowing with anger, I flew out of the office and nearly bumped into my son, who was already heading down for breakfast. He saw my furious mood and asked what had happened. In a fit of rage, I almost spilled out everything I had found out to him. But just in time, I managed to stop myself, realizing that Michael, though already a grown boy, might not be ready to know such truth yet. Pulling myself together, I simply told my son it was time for breakfast. Of course, with the children around, I couldn't bring myself to confront my brother, though I was barely containing it. Moreover, I wondered how he could do this to me, as we had always been close, once sworn never to hurt each other. And here I find out he betrayed me years ago. Did this happen even earlier? He used to visit us often back then, and we'd go on joint walks in the forest, even camping. Could their betrayal have lasted this long, And was I such a fool, loving them both, that I simply didn't notice? And now this cursed recording. Perhaps it would have been better if the boys hadn't thought of doing it, and I would never have known anything. But living without knowing the truth, I also considered wrong. Taking the flash drive from the camera, I returned to the kitchen where relatives were still having breakfast and suggested to my brother that we go for a ride. He was slightly surprised because until then, we had planned to stay home, watch the game with a beer, or share stories of what had happened to us over the years. But I insisted on my proposal, and it seemed like they all noticed my grim mood, but I didn't care what they thought. I just wanted to take my brother away from the kids and have a man-to-man talk. Kyle kept asking where we were going, but I didn't answer him, just saying it would be a surprise. Although maybe my brother suspected that I already knew everything at some point, it seemed that way to me. But then he continued his chatter and even suggested a few places we could visit. We stopped outside the city. I got out of the car, still unable to believe this was happening to me. Kyle followed me. But there's nothing here. What did you want to show me? He asked innocently. Show? You've already shown me. How could you? You were my brother. What are you talking about, bro? Kyle still pretended innocence. What? Are you still asking? I know everything, Kyle. About you and Mary. Oh, well, since you put it that way. Now Kyle changed his expression, and instead of apologies, which I at least expected from him, he just looked at me slyly and even chuckled. That infuriated me even more. I was angry before, but I hoped I could still control myself. And if my brother sincerely repented, I would have tried to forgive him. But apparently, he hadn't been my brother for a long time. I pushed aside all the other feelings I once had for him, and now saw only an enemy and a traitor before me. I lunged at him with my fists, wanting to vent all my anger on him. But Kyle wasn't weak either and began defending himself. We both received a lot of blows from each other, not saying a word. Our glances said it all. For several minutes, we fought and struggled, and those moments felt so long to me, as if an hour had passed already. Maybe it was because it was a fight with my brother, or maybe I was just sad because my wife's lover turned out to be my brother. With this thought, I delivered a decisive blow to his jaw, so strong that he simply blacked out. I felt so exhausted that I just sat down on the ground and leaned against the car. I just wanted to forget everything, but I couldn't. After sitting like that for a few minutes, I returned to the car. Kyle was still unconscious. I didn't bother to bring him to his senses. I just left him there and drove back home. Though I didn't particularly want to go home either, there were unfinished matters there. Arriving home, I gave the boys some pocket money and asked them to walk around for a few hours. The older one was initially a bit surprised by my generosity, but then it seemed like he understood and took his brother with him, saying they would only be back closer to the evening. And when they left, I called my wife and asked her to return home urgently. Marie started asking me in response what had happened, but I didn't answer, just repeated that she should come back as soon as possible. Then I approached Ruth and decided to have a serious conversation with her. It seemed to me that she knew much more than it appeared at first glance because she had remained absolutely calm so far, as if nothing had happened. Ruth, tell me honestly, how well do you know my brother? What connects you to him? And don't tell me it's just pure and innocent feelings between you. I sat opposite her in the living room while she was flipping through magazines, settled on the couch. What are you talking about? She distracted herself from reading and turned to me, her smile as usual, not leaving her face. Do I have something specific in mind? Yes, Ruth. I'm talking about tonight. Did you know that Marie went to see my brother? You were with him shortly before that. What were you arguing about? Oh, so you heard us. Why ask then? We thought you passed out after the kachaka. Kyle said this drink is out of your league. Don't mess with my head. Answer my question. Did you know he was with Marie? Well, I knew. So what? He told me about it back in Brazil. Ruth stood up, walked across the room, and stopped by the window, looking out. And did you yourself know what your brother was like? She asked me in response, still not turning to face me. What do you mean? I grew up with him. How could I not know him? Oh, of course. Blind faith in brothers. He wouldn't have confessed to you about Marie or what he was really doing in Brazil. You didn't know that he had gotten involved with drugs, thinking he could run that business. But it didn't work out for him. They caught him within the first few months, and he got jailed. He spent 2.5 years pacing the cell there. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing, although considering recent events, I no longer knew what to believe. You're lying. He would have told me. Well, yes, Ruth turned to face me. Just like he told you about his relationship with Marie. We met before he got out. During that time, he managed to learn a few things and decided to try his luck again. And things went quite well for him afterward. But he still made enemies and now owes some dangerous people. Very dangerous people. What does that have to do with this? What about my wife? Nothing at all. He came because he wanted to retrieve some valuable items he said were inherited from your granddad and kept here. And he took me along just to show off, I suppose. Although I've wanted to see America for a while. But wait, he sent me your photos. Does that concern you? Ruth returned to the couch and sat down again. Listen, now that his secret is out, I apparently have nothing else to do here, although the house is quite cozy. I'll go pack my things. Don't worry, I'll find my way out. And you're just going to leave your husband like that? I was still in some shock. I beg you. You wonder why you weren't invited to the wedding. There's no wedding. Ruth smiled broadly again and left the room. Now I hated her too, although she essentially revealed the whole truth about the brother, who turned out to be not only a traitor, but also a liar and a criminal. I stayed at home until Mary arrived. Ruth had already left before my wife came. I was overwhelmed with despair and anger again, and I didn't know how to contain myself. Not to lash out at my wife for her betrayal. When she entered the house and started asking me what happened and if everything was okay with the kids, I couldn't hold back, and my first response was a hard slap that immediately made Mary fall to the floor. Brian, what are you doing? She started, but apparently understood that I already knew her secret. How could you? I loved you all these years. I gave you everything. And you? How long have you been cheating on me with him? I asked how long. Are the kids even mine? I leaned over her, but Mary just cried and didn't even dare to get up from the floor. I grabbed her hand and dragged her to the couch. She stood up a little so she wouldn't drag herself across the floor, but she still stumbled the whole way, and one of her shoes was off one foot. When I dumped her on the couch, I sat across from her and stared at her with a glare. I'm sorry, was all Mary managed to say. I hoped she would say something more, but it seemed she didn't want to justify herself. I wanted to continue questioning her, but at that moment, the front door slammed shut, and I heard heavy footsteps, my brother's. He barged into the room where we were sitting and looked at me with some malice. From his disheveled appearance, Mary even flinched, seeing his clothes stained with dirt, mixed in places with blood. But apparently, he didn't know yet that Ruth had already told me about his plans and was trying to play the repentant brother. Listen, bro, things didn't work out between us. I know I was wrong. Forgive me. I just couldn't resist. Your wife. Don't you dare even talk about her. I stood up and walked towards him. You've lied so much that soon you'll confuse yourself. Speak up. Why did you come here? And don't you dare lie anymore. I already know about Ruth. Oh, he smirked. So that bitch spilled the beans. Damn it. She promised to keep quiet. Damn it. Well then, let's be straight. Yes, bro. I've always envied you. Dad always loved you more. But why? You always got everything best, even Grandpa's inheritance. Everything just for you. And now I came here to get what rightfully belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. I retorted and punched him again. From his tone, I realized my brother was only now being honest with me all those years before he was just pretending. But what stopped him before from taking the antique coin collection? What was he waiting for? Another fight erupted between us. And amidst the punches, when I found a moment and asked him about it, he said he wanted me to feel unwanted, that someone loved me less than him. And he even felt a bit sorry for this envious liar who just wanted attention. When I stopped beating him, Kyle also calmed down a bit and sat on a chair. Seems like he was already exhausted for the day. But I didn't want to just fight him anymore. After all, he was still my brother. So I turned to Marie again, who had been sitting on the couch, watching everything with horror. I already knew she had been deceiving me for a long time, but it was important for me to know if my children, Michael and Sammy, were mine. I love them so much that if they turned out not to be mine, I don't even know what I would have done. But Marie began swearing by everything that they were mine, and that her affair with Kyle started just a few months before he left for another country. It turned out, even then, he intended to use Marie to get the collection. But she refused back then because she was afraid of what I might do to both her and him later. And you thought these coins meant more to me than my own family? What do you take me for? I asked her after she told me everything. Kyle, if you want, take these damn coins. But just know, both you and Marie, you're dead to me tonight. If not for the recording, maybe you'd have pulled off your plan, Kyle. But as you can see, luck didn't favor you this time. I went to the study, took out a few coins from a box with soft padding, brought them to him, and then just threw the box at him like a dog, causing it to open, and several coins rolled out onto the floor. He greedily crawled onto them. When he collected them all, still glowering at us from under his brow, he left the room. I returned to my chair and stared at my wife again. She looked at me with some confusion. You just gave him the coins like that? Yes, gave them. Maybe they'll bring him some happiness. I've already lost mine several years ago when you betrayed me. Marie guiltily lowered her eyes. For a couple of minutes, she sat and looked at the floor, then just got up and rushed to my feet, begging me to forgive her. Now she was saying that Kyle had forced her, threatening to reveal her secret if she didn't agree. What other damned secret? I asked indifferently, as I'd already learned enough today and couldn't imagine what else could shock me. And then Marie told me she had another child, an older one. She gave birth to him before she met me, but she was only 17 then and couldn't keep him, so she gave him to other people. She accidentally blurted it out to Kyle when, during one of the holidays, she had a bit too much to drink, and he threatened to tell me that all these years she had been secretly sending money to her son. By the end of her story, Kyle appeared on the horizon again. He had changed clothes and was packing his suitcase to leave our house. He didn't say anything and silently left. I didn't say anything to him either. Only when he left, I told Marie to start packing her things too, because I couldn't stand her in the house anymore. Not because she had another child, but because of all the lies and betrayals she committed. About a month later, after these nightmarish events had ended and Marie had left our home, my brother called me and immediately started scolding me. When I asked him what was wrong again, he said that the coins I gave him turned out to be cheap fakes. And because of that, he got into big trouble. But I told him that the trouble he got into wasn't because of that, but when he decided to abandon his family and brother out of greed and envy. Of course, I knew the coins were not real. I had made copies long ago because I was afraid someone would decide to rob our house, and I kept the real coins in the safest place, buried them under our grandfather's tombstone. I wanted them to survive until my children grew up, and then I could share the inheritance with them, although now I doubted it and thought maybe these cursed coins should just stay with Grandpa. After Kyle and Marie left, I talked to my children and told them the whole truth. I knew they would understand me, and I hoped they would never make such a mistake. Story 2. It's not about my spouse and me. Our marriage has been happy for 14 years. Instead, this unfortunate incident involves my mother, a 59-year-old woman, and what she did to my father, who is 63 years old. So, it's not only young women who have affairs. Sometimes, older women are involved too. My parents had a joyful marriage that lasted over 38 years until everything changed last Thursday, around 3 years ago. My parents retired to Arizona. They purchased a lovely riverside home and a new diesel truck with a camper. They spend their time in Arizona from October to April, and the rest of the year, they embark on adventures, often traveling to cooler places like the mountains or the West Coast. They also spend around 4 to 6 weeks with my family in the high-elevation region of Utah. My husband has arranged complete RV hookups for them on our 16-acre property, including electricity, water, and septic connections. We thoroughly enjoy their company, and our kids love spending time with them too. Likewise, we love them. Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section, and also do like and subscribe to the channel.